Welcome to this workshop about the fragility of tropical forests. My name is Veronica Athanasiou, and I'm here on behalf of the Venezuelan community in Ireland. I am a trained scientist in agriculture and statistics, and I have taught biology advanced level for many years. I hope you enjoy this workshop. Tropical forests are known for their role as air regulators of our planet. They provide us with oxygen and absorb all the carbon dioxide that we generate not only from respiration, but also from our car exhausts and so on. We're going to explain why it is impossible, once we see those patches of bare soil from above, to recover them as the diverse and rich ecosystem they once were. Once deforestation takes place, this damage is irreversible. Why is that so? The tropical rainforest is the name of the vegetation biome associated with humid tropical equatorial climate. I'm going to be explaining some of these terms later on. A tropical equatorial climate is characterized for having a coldest month temperature above 18 degrees Celsius. These are regions that are hot and wet all year round, with more than 1,500 millimeters of annual rainfall. Their constant cloudiness prevents them from being the hottest areas on Earth, while they are receiving a high-angle noonday sun all year. Let's explain some keywords. We said a tropical forest is a biome. What is a biome? Well, a biome is a large ecosystem. And what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem consists of plant and animal communities that interact with the components that make up their habitat, which is nothing but their home. Some of these components that make up their habitat are climate and soil. So we have already explained about what makes a tropical climate is hot and humid with a minimum above 18 degrees Celsius. And now we will be looking a little bit at the soil. Soils are formed due to a process known as weathering of the rock, which is nothing but breaking the rock due to the effect of, for example, dripping water on it or changes in temperature. In humid tropical areas, we find the most rapid rates of weathering on Earth. However, it is not as fast as the nutrients are being consumed, and we're going to be looking at the nutrients later on. But since the soil is the place where the roots are growing, you have to think of it as a three-dimensional structure where all the chemical reactions are taking place, where all the nutrients are recycled, and where all the dead organic matter is going to. The rate of these chemical reactions are accelerated by hot and wet conditions. The tropical rainforest is the most productive biome because all requirements for growth are abundantly available. There is plenty of rainfall, heat, plenty of light, good soil depth since the parental rock is found sometimes as deep as 40 meters below the topsoil, and nutrients, plenty of nutrients that are found mainly in the biomass. And this is key as to how the tropical forest is able to regrow once it is cut down. How does this ecosystem work? It's not really different from any other ecosystem. Before we mention biomass, I must clarify here that biomass refers to the bodies of all the living organisms of which the plants are part. We mustn't forget that the parts are also living organisms and very important in any ecosystem. The green leaves of the plants absorb sunlight energy and they incorporate it into the food chains by creating organic compounds via photosynthesis. This is one of the most important processes on Earth that we sometimes do not really pay much attention to, but photosynthesis is the miracle that allows life on Earth to exist as we know it. Once the energy from light is incorporated into organic compounds, they can be consumed and pass along what we call the food chain. So the plants are known as the producers because they take this energy from light and are able to incorporate it into food that then can be consumed by herbivores and can be then consumed by carnivores and so on. Nutrients are recycled from dead bodies to the soil, and eventually they go to the plants again. In the tropical rainforests, most nutrients are found in the dense vegetation, but also in other life forms. In the tropical forest, a substantial number of leaves fall daily. A litter store is formed, the smallest store of nutrients compared to the reserve in the living parts of the biome. Organic matter accounts for only 2% of the biomass in tropical ecosystems. As the rain falls in the tropical forest, it carries with it nutrients that can be absorbed by a special group of plants called epiphytes, where the orchids belong. These are plants that grow on the branches and corners of tall tropical trees, and they have aerial roots and leaves that are adapted to absorb the nutrients from the rainfall. Decomposition of litter and fallen trees is extremely fast in the tropical forest. Decomposers such as fungi and bacteria provide a large and rapid transfer of nutrients from litter to soil. These are taken up quickly through the dense network of roots near the soil surface. It is probably clear up to this point that if the vegetation is removed, the nutrients will be lost with it. So when there is cutting of trees for logging, for mining, for changing the use of land, then we are removing most of the nutrients that are found in the tropical rainforest. Other losses are due to leaching, which is when nutrients are washed deep into the soil by the rain. But the main loss of nutrients is when we remove its biomass. And I'm not talking only about the litter on the topsoil. I'm talking about cutting the trees and with them removing the habitats also for all of the animals and other living organisms that share this important biome on Earth. Removing the biomass exposes the soils. Soils of the humid tropical biome are called oxysols, the typical ones. They are very old, they are highly weathered, and they are so intensely leached. Remember, we said leaching is when the nutrients go deep down into the soil layers. So they are so intensely leached that few minerals that can undergo further weathering remain in the soil. Not only we expose soil to erosion, once the vegetation is removed, many times burning follows. So the areas are cleared for other purposes, and sometimes there is burning. This causes the soils to deteriorate, and it prevents healthy regeneration when the activity ceases. So they cut the trees, they remove the biomass, they expose the soil to erosion, they burn. By burning, they kill the seedlings of the plants that were there originally. So there is less chance for the same plant species to grow. They remove the nutrients, and there is less probability of healthy regeneration of the forest once the human activity ceases. Now brace yourselves, for we are going to see some pictures of the level of devastation that human activities can have on this fragile ecosystem. In this photo, we see parts of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil with ponds of dirty water. They result from hydraulic mining. This is an image in Peru containing a few of these ponds resulting from hydraulic mining. Notice how Notice the contrast between the area where illegal mining had taken place and the forest growing next to it. So all of this bare area where the ponds can be seen were once covered by tropical rainforest. This is an area in Brazil where, again, the contrast between the area where human activities took place on the right, there was cutting of the trees or deforestation, and it hasn't recovered. We just see a few trees here and there. And notice how the area was originally before deforestation. So the area on the left is the untouched tropical forest, or at least it hasn't been touched relatively recently. And the area on the right, which is how the tropical forest just becomes a grassland, because the only thing that can grow in such poor soil where all the nutrients have been removed and they have been washed and the soil is not able to regenerate on its own, then it can only be occupied by grasses. Can the forest regenerate? Can the tropical forest grow back after there has been removal of its biomass? It will depend on a few factors. Some of them are whether there was burning or not afterwards. Some of them depend on also the area of the deforestation is important. How many original species are left, whether it's 100% deforestation or whether there are patches that are left for the species to remain in place. So the forest can be managed so that it can be regenerated. This is what the original inhabitants of the land were doing for thousands of years before the Europeans arrived into the Amazon region, for example. So the original inhabitants of the land will cut down some trees to grow their crops, but there will be really small areas. Obviously, a small area that is surrounded by the trees and the other plants and the animals that make up the tropical rainforest are going to have a source of seedlings, of nutrients, of activity that will help it recover and go back to how it was before deforestation happened. However, as the area of deforestation increases, then you can imagine that it's going to be harder for the original plant species to grow back. The seedlings can be destroyed, they will be removed. If there is no source of these seedlings, then how are the plants going to grow? It is impossible. What happens after the original vegetation in an area is removed is called a vegetation succession. It's a series of changes to a plant community over time as local conditions that influence them change. A succession can be arrested naturally by fire, flood, or drought, or by human activities such as felling, burning, or cultivation. A 2019 study by Lancaster University showed that regrowth after deforestation, called secondary forest, does not absorb as much carbon dioxide as it was originally estimated. Even after 60 years of regrowth, the studied secondary forests held only 40% of the carbon in forests that had not been disturbed by humans. It will take well over a century for the forests to fully recover at the current levels of temperature increase and droughts. Biodiversity levels in the secondary forests that they studied were only 56% of those seen in local undisturbed forests, with no increase in species diversity during the 20 years of monitoring. The numbers speak for themselves. 100 years to recover a forest. Shall we then not use the land and just to grow one plant species, like the one in this photo, to grow a particular cereal for human consumption? Shall we not take into account the role of the forest in controlling global warming? The key to how to better manage the use of forest space is sustainability. Further research is needed in this area. So I hope that from this workshop, some of you will be motivated to look into it. And why not make it a career? There is a case study in Colombia about sustainable cattle ranching. In Colombia, large areas of tropical forest were cleared for cattle ranching. It proved disastrous in terms of meat yield, and pastures were abandoned to soil erosion. Nowadays, sustainable ranches leave a certain number of forest trees standing so that there is cycling of nutrient and ultimately productivity. Thank you very much for your attention.